So we're talking about the AirCheck G3. And the AirCheck G3 is a pretty cool device. We've got the ability now to look at 6 gigahertz, which is one of the main upgrades from the AirCheck G2. But there's also some other differences that we're going to talk about. So what I'm going to show here is an example of the AirCheck G3 kit that I have here, and this is the SKU if you wanted to order one of these. And I'm going to go through and kind of show you what's in the bag, and you're going to be able to see what you would get if you ordered this SKU here. So you do get the awesome little sling bag here, and of course we have the G3. Look at that in a second. A nice little carrying case for it as well. Going to have a tri-band antenna for locating. So tri-band because we have 2, 4, 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz that we now need to look at. Test accessory for doing some high performance testing, and the spectrum analyzer adapter as well that we have in there. And of course, you get the miscellaneous power adapters for your country. You get the USB-C power cord to be able to work with this on it. But we mainly care just about the particular hardware unit here itself. And what I want to do real quick here is I'm going to bring up and show the differences here between a G2 and a G3. One of the big ones that you're going to notice is that on the G2, we had an Ethernet port. We don't have the Ethernet port on the G3. If you're going to be doing a lot of wired and wireless testing, our recommendation would be is that you're going to want to go with an Etherscope NXG where we've got that built in. But we do have the ability, for example, if we wanted to do long-term testing where we wanted to leave it on a wired connection instead of a wireless connection, because we might be bringing the wireless connection up and down, we do have the ability here to leverage a USB Ethernet adapter plugged into one of the USB ports and be able to bring on a wired management interface from that way. So we've got the antenna port here that we can go ahead and connect our tri-band antenna if we wanted to be doing a device locating or trying to find interference source or rogue AP, something like that. We've got another USB-A up on the top. So there's 2 USB-As on the top, on the side, and then a USB-C for charging on the left-hand side. Right-hand side, we've got volume knobs and then our power button. So I already have this booted up, so I'm just going to turn it on here. See, one of the big differences, and I'll show you the screens more closely, is that this is now running an Android OS. So it's going to look very similar to the 10G and the Etherscope NXG, which gives us a lot of pluses onto it. The AirCheck G2 launched right into basically what was the Wi-Fi tester app. We've got more apps on the G3 that we can leverage, and we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at some of those as well here. And I know we said that somebody's going to be able to go home with one of these as well. So how are you going to be able to win one of these? Well, what we have done for you to be able to win one of these is we've got a little bit of a contest here that you're going to have to enter into. So you can go ahead and you can scan this QR code with your phone. Trust me, it's safe. There's no malicious QR code intents here or anything going on with that. When you scan this, you are going to be able to go through a quick form that asks for your name and your email. There's a key element here. You need to use the email address that you signed up for the webinar with, okay? So once you put that information in, at the end, we're going to find a winner. So we'll leave this QR code up throughout most of the webinar, so you can go ahead and scan it at your leisure to be able to get that into there. All right, so one thing I want to talk about real quick on the G3, and it is in regards to interfaces, because this is slightly different from what we had with the G2. Now, in the G2, we didn't really have this concept of a management interface and a tester interface. We have that Ethernet interface, and we had Wi-Fi that could connect and join. But with the G3 device now, we kind of separate out these into a couple different roles, and it's important to understand the differences of how we leverage and how we utilize these things. So one thing that always confuses me when I'm doing a setup on these devices, the setup for this is, if you want to bring the management Wi-Fi interface on, that's through Android. So I swipe down on it and I can see I've got my Wi-Fi here, and it says it's connected to my Wi-Fi network in there, which is perfectly fine in there. Or I could go through the settings app here and I could go and I could look for my networks and connect up in a traditional, typical Android aspect of it. This interface is only a 2.4 gigahertz and a 5 gigahertz network. It is not the 6 gigahertz interface. The 6 gigahertz interface is on the Wi-Fi tester side. Okay, so that's where the confusion sometimes comes into play, is that if you don't have the G3 connected from the tester interface, the test interface, excuse me, you won't be able to run things like iPerf tests and some of the other tests that we have, because it's not going to go over the management interface. It wants to go over the test interface. And I'll show you how you connect the test interface here in just a little bit. But that's a big thing that I always kept forgetting. And even when I was going through and getting prepped for the webinar, I completely spaced. I'm like, why can't I see my 6 gigahertz networks? What's going on? And it's like, oh yeah, duh, Blake, remember, there's the wireless management interface, which is the Android side of it. And then there's the wireless tester interface, which is a completely different interface and controlled differently. That's the one that has the 6 gigahertz on it. Okay, so we've got those 2x interfaces that we have to work with when we're leveraging the tester. First thing that you're going to do when you get this device is you're going to want to associate to LinkLive. Why are you going to want to associate to LinkLive? Why? I got all this data right here. It's right on the handheld. Well, LinkLive is our free service that allows you to be able to have remote connectivity into the devices, as well as remote visibility into the data that's being captured. So it works great if you have an engineer on site that is capturing and doing all the testing and uploading in real time if they have an internet connectivity there. So let's say, for example, the site's not deployed yet. They don't have their WAN interface. Well, that's fine. You could associate to your hotspot in your phone, for example, or in a tablet, and be able to get connected that way to be able to upload the data with it. So when we go through this, what I'm going to show you here is not necessarily entirely accurate, because I already have it claimed. I didn't want to go through the entire process of unclaiming it and then reclaiming it for the webinar, but we're going to go through the screens and look at and show you what you see. So the first thing you would launch into, and by default, if it isn't claimed, when you turn on your AirCheck G3, it's going to go through some of this process as well automatically. So you're going to go through and you're going to get into the LinkLive, and you're going to see a button that says claim now, which I don't see because I don't have mine's already claimed in there. But we would be able to go and walk through the process in our LinkLive and be able to look at that. So I'm going to switch over to here real quick, and let's get into LinkLive. Get out of the presentation, go to LinkLive. So inside of my units, what I would do here is I would be going and I would hit this floating action button down here. And I would say I want to claim a unit. And I select which unit I want to claim. In this case, I want to claim a G3. And you can see that, okay, we need to have some sort of connectivity to it. And then we go through and we say continue. Yep, we did that. That's already up on our screen there. And then we would normally say claim now. And then we would enter in the MAC address and listen. And it would go through this process where once that handheld tester, it's going to send out these little heartbeats fuel up into the LinkLive every so often while it's connected to the interface. And if it notices that it's supposed to be claimed by somebody on the dashboard, it's going to go ahead and associate those two together so that you can then start being able to do some of the configuration on it. So I'll pull up my G3 that I have right here and show you some of the information that we see inside of LinkLive when we're looking at it here. So this information that we have in here, pretty straightforward, pretty basic, MAC address, serial device type. What's the system firmware application version? I get asked every now and then, why is there two different versions? Well, there's the underlying Android OS on these devices, as well as our NetAlly application tools as well. So those could be different versions. They're rarely different versions, but there could be the possibility that we have to push some sort of OS level version fix that's not tied to an application version fix. So that's why we show you different versions that are in there. The last seen status, and also when I claimed this, when I was able to get that device. So yeah, it was Merry Christmas to me is when I got my G3 here. And the information about it, does it have a wired management IP? Does it have a Wi-Fi management IP? Does it have a Wi-Fi test IP? So you can see we could have potentially 3 IP addresses for this device. And those are all based off of those different interfaces that it has on there. What we have for our email settings, if we want the alerts and everything on it. But you'll notice this is a new section right here, this pair unit. So I previously mentioned that the AirCheck G3 compared to the AirCheck G2 lacks an Ethernet interface. And one of the things that a lot of folks liked about the G2, and myself included, was that I could just do quick little checks if I wanted to about the wired side to see, do I have PoE, what IP addresses, that kind of stuff that I'm getting onto it. What we ended up doing with the G3 is we added the ability here just recently to be able to pair a test accessory or a link sprinter to the AirCheck G3, meaning that anytime that test accessory or link sprinter performs a first startup test, so it's going through and checking the PoE, the link, the DHCP, gateway, cloud access, all of that. What we can actually do is we can have it send that information to the G3, and as long as the G3 is online and connected to Link Live, we'll receive a little pop-up message or a notification here in the Android section that will say what that recent information was. So one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually go ahead and I'm going to grab a test accessory. So let's take test accessory 1. So by just toggling that, I've now paired it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and I'm going to connect this up to an interface that I have in here. And just so that you can see that I am actually connecting it. Here's my test accessory. And I'm going ahead and do this. Now, I'm not going to wait for this to go through the entire process because I want to be able to cover all the things that we want to talk about. But I do want to make sure that you're aware that, okay, yes, we are, this is happening in the background here. And eventually we are going to get that notification of this test accessory result. And this is something that was asked a lot at WLPC by a lot of the attendees was, what happened to my Ethernet? How can I do some of this test on here? So we do have the ability to get some of that information. It does lack some of the information, mainly layer 2 LLDP, CDP messages, so I can't get the switch port interface information. But it gets us pretty close to what we did have with the G2, and now we have it as 2 different devices. And it's kind of nice also with this is that if you have a remote tech that's out there doing this work while you're doing something else, we have the ability to go ahead and say, okay, yep, all this information, I'm collecting this wireless. Oh, I just got a test result in. And I know it's going to be a little bit hard to see on the left-hand screen side of there, but we actually just did get a new icon up in the notification bar that looks like a test accessory or looks like a link sprinter. So if I slide down on here and I go ahead and I scroll it, it says new result from BKTA01. That's my test accessory. I go ahead and I click on the arrow there. And here I can see that quick information. It was able to get 51.8 volts. That's what it detected on it. Now, this is not true power test, however, though. Just remember, that's not true power test. That's just their PoE there. Okay? We got 1 gig link, full duplex, what our IP address was, our DNS, and our gateway. So we saw that information pretty quickly and pretty easily. Just required us to have that test accessory or that link sprinter.
Hey, Blake, a few questions here that are coming up.
Yep.
And Guy, I'm on the main screen since I'm talking. Related to the Ethernet test, there's a few questions that came up here from the team or the crowd. Number 1, does any USB to Ethernet adapter works, or do you need a certain brand?
So far from my testing, any Ethernet adapter that I've tested has worked because they're all pretty much a standard adapter. I asked that question to James as well, and he had said that they tested a lot in their validation unit testing of it and didn't really find anything that wouldn't work. So I'm going to say a pretty safe guess is that anything that you find on your Amazon special is probably going to work.
Yep. And that is correct also from our perspective, guys. Basically, any type of adapter should work. So you should be good there. Then another question. Let's see. Oh, yeah. What if the test accessory doesn't have internet access? Can the G3 and test accessory pair via Bluetooth?
No, they cannot. The test accessory does not have a wireless interface, like, for example, like a link sprinter would. In that case, what you would do in that situation is that I would recommend leveraging a link sprinter 300. And the reason why I recommend that one is because it has the access point built into it. So you can turn on that access point. So I could connect the G3 here to that link sprinter 300, which I have right up in here. I could connect it to that access point in there, and I would be able to pull up the web browser of the Link Sprinter 300 and be able to see the test results that way. But there is no Bluetooth radio in them, so no, we cannot get the data via Bluetooth. That is certainly good feedback, product feedback for potentially future versions, right, Julio?
Indeed, indeed. In reality, it is a pretty good idea since the AirCheck already has a Bluetooth radio, technically, uh, or you could connect to it. Or another option, now that I think about it, is that, for example, on the Lynx printer, as you mentioned, since you have the little Wi-Fi radio in there, you can directly connect from the AirCheck to the Lynx printer. Not on the
Yep.
test accessory, though.
Yeah, and I just saw another one that popped in here. You know, pairing with it sounds great, but why send to the G3 when it can already send the results to Link Live itself? It's mainly because of the fact that I don't necessarily always have my Link Live screen here up and running and being able to get, you know, I go in here and I have these results in here. And one of the things is that if you're doing this in a large test deployment out there, one of the reasons why I like this feature is that I can limit it so that I can say, okay, I only want these particular results to come down onto my AirCheck. So if I'm doing some checks of ports while I'm also checking wireless, I can see that I'm actually getting that data and that data is being successfully recorded. So it's kind of a checks and balance for me, if you will, where I can look at it and say, yes, that data is actually up in Link Live because it's traversed Link Live, obviously to get sent down to my G3 in terms of a notification.
Okie doke. Then we have a few more questions, and I've been getting this question a few times. So, for those of you guys that are like watching the webinar from your phone, and because of that, you may be having problems scanning the QR code. My suggestion, if you can take a screenshot of basically what you're seeing here on the screen right now on the QR code, then as soon as you can, later, just email that to your laptop or something and then scan the QR code. Or if you have a second device, scan it now.
I'm putting the link as a announcement right now.
Yeah, there you go. That should work.
So that'll take it. There's nothing special about the QR code. It's just a lot of times it's easier than trying to type and everything. So trying to be all fancy and high tech. Yeah. Okay.
Then there's a few more questions here, very super quickly. These are more roadmap related, so I'll answer them very quickly for you guys. So number one, and I think you'll be talking about this, Blake, later regarding the spectrum analyzer. But one of the questions is, will there be a 6 gigahertz version of the spectrum analyzer? The answer is yes. And we're thinking that will be available sometime late Q3 or early Q4. So that's coming along. Another question here regarding roadmap. Some of you, those that were at WPC, may remember that there was an announcement with integration between the AirCheck and Hamina. That is indeed going to happen, and when the Hamina solution, and they will be available when the Hamina solution gets released officially. I think right now they're still on beta. And okie doke, we'll come back to the questions later, so I'll let you move on, Blake.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my units here in Link Live and select that. So that was where we ended up. There was our pair units. You can have as many units as you want paired to it. So you can see I've got 5 different units in here. I could have them all paired to it and they could all send their test informations onto it. Again, it's flexibility. It's another way to be able to have access to that Ethernet information without us having to have a Link Runner 10G with us, NXG, or having that Ethernet interface in the device itself. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about here real quick from this particular screen here is I want to show one of my favorite features of Link Live being paired with the testers and primarily being paired with a 10G, NXG, or the AirCheck G3, and that's this remote option. So you've got Ally Care on your devices, which you're going to have it for, first year release when you purchase it, but it's good to keep that for software updates. One of the other reasons is right here is this remote button. And this remote button is something that I leverage when I want to be able to ship out a unit. So I have a Pelican case with foam that's pre-cut and everything in there that I can throw one of these testers in and ship out to a customer unit before I even fly. And I can say, okay, here's what I want you to do is I want you to connect this to the network, either wired if it's an NXG or wireless if it's the G3 now. And once it's online, this button will be green. And with it being green here, when I click on remote, what's going to happen is it's actually going to create a secure connection down to that handheld tester where I can look at it as if I was physically sitting in front of it. So when I go through and I adjust anything, what I want to show you here is that two things is I could launch something by clicking on the button through the UI and on the web on the link live, and you can see I launched that on the handheld device. But I also can have full control still from a handheld device, be able to walk through and look at everything. So whatever I wanted to do in here, I can see that. So if I have an engineer, like I said, on site, they can go through and they can start running some of these tests. They can start looking at the discovery, or they can do stuff, and I can kind of shadow them in either on the job training or as remote smart hands, remote assistance, escalation points, whatever the case might be, where I can look at and watch everything that they're doing. So this is a great way of leveraging the device remotely for when I want to be able to do some long distance testing without physically being on site. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this just simply because it does add a little bit of a leg to it. So I don't want to have more leg than we already have going on with just showing us through the webinar system and everything. So let's dive in and let's talk about the new tests. Let's talk about the new software. Let's talk about how this all works now with the AirCheck G3 compared to that interface that you're used to on the G2. So the G2, when it was first turned on, what it did is it just simply launched basically what we have still here as the Wi-Fi app. And the Wi-Fi app came up, and if I actually open up the sidebar here, you'll see everything here. The Wi-Fi app came up with your channels, your SSIDs, your APs, your BSIDs, clients, etc. And you selected one of those elements that you wanted to look at to dive down into the details of what you're looking at. And it was very driven, or it was driven off of you kind of need to know some of what you're looking at in order to get to where you want to go from a troubleshooting perspective. But we've got some different ways of doing this now with deep links, where we can link into all the different elements and all the different aspects of being able to look at the data, and we can present that in what I like to say is a more user-friendly way of being able to kind of start from the top with your SSID and then ultimately end up down into having all your tests and everything configured. So real quick here, what we've got now on the view here, the map 6E, because this is a 6 gigahertz radio. So this is when we talked about those dual interfaces. This is now looking at the tester interface, the tester Wi-Fi card. And you can see I do have I have two APs on the 6 gigahertz side of things. So you can see them there. Our overlap, all the traditional screens that we've seen, being able to look at it through the bottom and select which screens you want to look at here. And then being able to look at the AP details. Spectrum, we'll kind of look at this in just a little bit. Then also we can look at our channels, that traditional channels list that we had in the G2 of being able to go through things, SSIDs, etc. So I'm not going to go through all these screens because they're very similar to what we had on the G2. But like I said, I want to kind of talk and walk through what I usually do as a workflow when I'm going through it. So when I get on a customer site, a lot of times, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the Wi-Fi app and I go right into the SSIDs. And that's mainly because of the fact that I'm there to troubleshoot something. I'm there to do a survey. I'm there to look at a particular SSID. So I want to find that inside of my list. So we're going to use my 6 gigahertz SSID for this example, because why not? We want to be able to see that 6 gigahertz capabilities of this new AirCheck G3. So this is my 6 gigahertz capable SSID, WPA3, protected. You can see it saying that it's the strongest AP, but I have a couple APs in here, so I can look at the different APs that are in here. I can go through and I can look at the different BSSIDs and select down onto it. But why I always come to this view is because you got that floating action button, the purple button, the FAB. So that floating action button, it gives me the option to be able to do a connect right from here, where what it does is it launches over into the auto test profile. And if I didn't already have this configured, it'd be asking me to the configuration details, the pre-shared key, all that jazz to be able to set it up. But the reason why I go this route is because when I talked about in the beginning about having these dual interfaces and trying to figure out which one's connected where, Android controls the management interface. But if you want to connect and associate through the test interface, This is how you go through that process. We need to find that in the SSID list, select it, configure it, and then basically do a test to connect to it so we can get all that data on it. So you can see that my auto test here has ran, and it's all the same information from the G2. We've still got all that all the information about what the SSID was. But one of the things that you'll notice here is there's a lot of links. Okay, there's all these different links in here that I can click on, and we see our graphs in here, everything that we have in here, our connect log. I'll show you in a second the dots here so that we can upload these graphs into Link Live. One of my favorites here, let's click on this connect log. It's going to dive over directly into the actions that happen for this device in order for it to actually get online. So it's looking at starting out the wireless, what the SSID was, WPA3. Let's begin that scan for the AP. All right, we got our RSN information elements. Management frame enabled. What channels are we on? Let's connect to that AP. Let's go through our four-way handshake. All of those information is just quickly and easily accessible right here, including DHCP and everything. And again, we can save that to Link Live as well if we want. So we hit the back button. Because of these deep connected links, when we hit the back button, it knows where we came from. It's a navigation stack that we push and pop from that navigation stack onto all of our different information. If I click the AP, it's going to bring up the Wi-Fi app with the AP, and here's all the information about that AP that I clicked on from that IP address in there. All the SSIDs that are available on that, all the BSSIDs that are available on it, what channels it's on, what clients it has. So we have all this deep navigation link integration through all this to get from anywhere that we want to be able to find further information about it. When I'm in the channels here, I can go and I can say, what are the channel details? Okay. Here's the channels information that I have. So now I can see all the different SSIDs, everything that's on there. So through these new, rich, deep links that we have in the Wi-Fi app, what that's doing is, or the auto test setup, is it's actually just calling all the different applications that are now present on the tool that we didn't have before. Path analysis, discovery, and all those that we're going to look at here. And I see there's a couple questions here that are coming in here, so we'll kind of answer those real quick on is the option in the G2 gone? So VNC has been upgraded, and that's this new way of doing it. You still can access it through VNC if you're on the same IP network or same, if you have a route to that IP address. You don't need to go through Link Live. Link Live just makes it so that it's easier to do from a remote location. So we still have VNC option. That's still there. Connect to G3 to a wired network for updates. No, updates happen over wireless as long as it has some sort of connection. The intent with the G3 device is that it is a wireless first device. That's why we don't have the Ethernet port on it. So if we want to connect through that wireless management interface, that's how we get our updates. That's how I get my updates down onto the G3 device. Send a device on a remote site and test a network captive portal remotely. You certainly could. The caveat being is that you need to have a USB Ethernet dongle. You have to have that because that's where we need to obviously then have a fully connected and routed interface that we can access that is separate from it, or you need to have a wireless network that the management interface is connected to that is different than your captive portal network. No, the Link Runner 10G with a wireless card does not have anywhere near the same features as what we are talking about here. Okay, so looking through, yes, thank you for clearing them as we're looking through here. WPA2, WPA3 Enterprise Network, you can load up certificates on it. I need to work with the team on some of this. I've had some issues with some of my networks on it. I just haven't had time to work with it, but it'll be able to do enterprise authentication support as well. We have the standard Android public certificates, so, root certificates from like VeriSign and whatnot that would come with a traditional Android OS deployment on a phone or a tablet, but you can also add your additional ones as well. And yes, you can authorize and do all the AP names with this. So that was one of the things that I was going to talk about here in just a few when we look at discovery. So we'll cover that in just a second. Recap the difference between the two radios in the device. So the two radios in the device, we have the wireless interface, which is controlled, or the management interface, which is controlled through Android here. And it's just a traditional 2x2, 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz compatible wireless adapter that you would find in any Android phone, tablet, whatever is out there. And that is set up through the Android settings here, network and internet, Wi-Fi, and whatever shows up in here. If you're not going to use that for your testing, you can use it for some of the tests if you want, but primarily the testing is going to be done through the wireless test interface. That is what is controlled through auto test and controlled through setting up in your profiles here where we have this connect to MobiAdroit. So those are the two different ones that you have on there. Okay, I'll get back to some of the other questions here in just a little bit. I want to keep going through some more of the new features that we have in here, and especially make sure that we get time for the spectrum and then sharing and long-term, because those are key elements that I think of using the G3 with its new update that we have in here. So this is what we traditionally had, which is just this Wi-Fi app to be able to get some of those wireless test results out on there. But now that we have the underlying Android OS as well that we have access to in here, it enables us to do more features like what we had on the NXG and on the 10G from a wired side perspective, which are things like path analysis and discovery. So I can launch those apps directly if I want to, just by looking at them at the screen here. But there's also other ways to get into path analysis as well from a Wi-Fi tool in here, or from the Wi-Fi in here. Is, I can go through and I can select something. So obviously this is me, so I'm not going to do a path analysis to myself. But if I were to go down here and let's say, it was right there. There we go. Let's select my Link Runner 10G that I have here. I can go to the tool here and I can say I want to capture. Here's your name and authorizations that we have in there, so that you can authorize it and give it the name, everything that we had in there. But it actually just went to sleep on me, so it's not connected anymore. So bad choice on that device. I can't actually do a analysis to that one. But all right, here we go. Get that client. There we go. Click on the MAC address. This one is up and online. So by using those rich links here, all I did is I just selected one of my devices here. It happens to be this little switcher box that I have here. And I go ahead and I can click on that floating action tool, the floating action button. I see all this information, all the things I can do now. So I can add it as a test target. So I could use through discovery and find what are the different test targets that I want to be able to look at. I can do port scans. One of my favorites is path analysis. So when I click on path analysis, what's going to happen is we're basically doing a trace route to this device. So I'm going to say, okay, start that. And it's not going to take long because it doesn't have to go far. You can see I went out. What did I go out? Oh, I went out my Wi-Fi management port. Why did I not go out the test interface? Blake, didn't you say that the test interface was leveraged? Well, for some of these things, we're going to use any available port. So for some of this, I might have to go up and I might have to change the settings to say, I want to go out the Wi-Fi port, the management port, or a wired management port. So I'm going to change that to the Wi-Fi port here. And when I run that again, ooh, no interface with IP address. What's going on here? Well, remember I said that we have to make sure that we're connected to it. So because I've been kind of hopping around and stuff, I actually was disconnected from that. So I need to make sure that I am connected to that network. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get connected again from the wireless test interface perspective so that I can specifically call out and use that. And that's why it chose to use the wireless management port, is because of the fact that I wasn't actually still connected to the network, the MobiAdroit network, wirelessly. So now that I'm going to go ahead and I'm get myself connected here again, go through this process. Yep, everything's good. We got our IP address. Everything should be fine in here. Now when I go back and look at my path analysis, it should, yep, you can see now I'm able to use this, and I went out the Wi-Fi port. So you can see it says out Wi-Fi port, SSID, MobiAdroit. That's my device. That's how I went and did my testing. It went across an access point. And you can see in order to reach this, because I went from 6 gigahertz down to 5 gigahertz connection, I actually ended up going wireless from the AirCheck down to my access point, went out the same access point, but it went out a different SSID, which is my 5 gigahertz network, to the device itself right there. So that's one of the other gotchas that you'll find was when you're doing this is that you have to be aware and cognizant of what's actually connected and what's not connected, because otherwise you'll miss something and be like scratching your head. And that's the same, that's holds true for iPerf test as well. iPerf is going to go across the wireless interface. So you can see I have it as Wi-Fi port there. It's not going to work if I'm not connected to it. So when I hit the start on here, it's going to connect up to that test accessory that we previously connected. And now we're testing across the Wi-Fi port, which is going across our wireless link, going into this wired jack through all my switches and everything. Not too bad. And don't exactly remember how that switch is connected through there, to be honest, what the entire path is, but I can see all that data in there, and I have that test results information in there. And then if I want to, go ahead and upload all of that, including those graphs, to LinkLive, and I'll have that data inside of LinkLive in there. So path analysis works pretty well. Discovery is another one of my favorite tools that we have in here. And basically what Discovery does is it's going out and it's just looking for everything that's connected to the network, whether it's wireless, wired, it's anything that has an IP address in there. And we're kind of trying to match all this together and how it actually looks. So as I go through and I ran this Discovery here, these are all the devices that are on my network, all my Sonos, you can see the different test accessories are in here. So I could easily find one of those test accessories and then say I want to run an iPerf test to it, be able to find that without having to know what the IP addresses were, my laptops, whatever it might be, all that information is in there. And one of the things I can do with this is I can send and upload that to LinkLive. And when I upload it into LinkLive, get some really fun little topographical or topology maps of that. And my computer went to sleep here because we weren't on it. So let's get the computer woken up here. So if I go under analysis, it's uploading that discovery right now, but I just so happen to have a discovery from here that I already ran. So if we go ahead and we click into this and we can look at it, you're going to get this view of all of your devices. And the ones that we kind of could resolve the links on, oops, scrolled the wrong way. You zoom in here. What we could resolve the links on, we've gone ahead and done that and said, okay, these devices here are connected to this particular access point. So I can go through and I can see that information of it. And then one of the other things that I can do in a discovery analysis is I can look at discovery differences. So I can go and I can say, okay, I'm going to select this new one that we ran, and I'm going to compare it to this discovery that we previously ran. And I'm going to go ahead and generate that. If I click on it, I can go through and I can look at it and I can see what the differences are. So you see there's 14 devices that were missing. There's 64 new devices that were there. And all this information is going to be shown to me, and I'm going to be able to look at and see what's new, what's missing, so I can see offline devices, everything in there. So Discovery adds a new way of looking at it from just seeing that wireless client list to now seeing how things are kind of associated together. And this works out well if you're doing long-term analysis where you're leaving this on a device to see, do I have a bunch of devices that are falling off the network sporadically? I can run different discoveries and look at that and see what that looks like from my point of view. All right, where are we at? 11:45. Okay, I'll get to those questions here in just a few. I just got a couple more little sections that I want to talk about, and then we'll run through some questions. So a big one that we now also have is the ability to look at spectrum. So when I want to look at spectrum analysis here, that's where I'm going to leverage the spectrum adapter here. As we previously mentioned, right now the NXT 1000 only does 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz. Hopefully here in the near future, like Julio said, we will have one that does 6 gigahertz, but for now, you've got 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz that you can look at. So to leverage this, what I do is just plug it into one of the USB interface ports that I have on here, either the left or the top one, doesn't matter. and I can launch into the Spectrum app here. And when I launch the Spectrum app, I need to switch this over so that you can see this. The Spectrum Analysis app goes into a landscape mode instead of portrait mode here. And normally you would want your Wi-Fi turned off, but I don't want to turn that off because I need to be able to stay connected. So we're going to dismiss that message out of there. But here you can see the data that we're looking at here for 5 gigahertz right now. So this is the amplitude dBm that we're looking at for our energy across the spectrum in there. But if I want here, I can go and I can say I want to look at the 2.4 gigahertz just by selecting up the settings and say OK. And then going back into the screen there. And now you can see that it switched over to 2.4. And I can see a lot more on 2.4 because my 5 gigahertz is relatively clean here. But 2.4, I have a bunch of devices, my Sonos and everything else that's out there. If I want to, I can switch from the frequency spectrum view to the waterfall view, where this is what we've traditionally seen in our Spectrum XT software. So I can see how is that energy related to over time, which is extremely important, because if something is very high energy, but doesn't stay online for a long time, it has a relatively low duty cycle, might not be as big of a deal. But if it has a very high duty cycle and it's constantly blaring, we're going to have problems with that. Okay. I can also look at real time as well if I want to. So again, just like anything else, I see something interesting. I see something that I want to look at in further detail, or I want to share with a customer. So whatever view I'm in here, doesn't matter which one I'm at. Let's go to the spectrum here. Excuse me. Whatever view, I just click the 3 dots up at the top. I say upload graphs to Link Live. I can give it a comment, a job comment, everything if I want to. But when I save that up into there, sorry, I had to go on mute there to cough for a second. When I go through and look at this, if I go and I look at my files, I see here is that new image that I now have access to that I could add to an album, or I could export it out and end up sharing with everybody. So Spectrum 245 gigahertz today. Leverage it to be able to get some of that quick information about interference sources, what's going on in the network, upload and share those graphs through Link Live. Again, the power of using these devices, it's related to whether or not you use Link Live and how extensive you use Link Live. Once you bring all this data into Link Live, there's a lot that you can do with it. So we want to make sure that you're leveraging Link Live so that you can get the data uploaded, get those images down, as opposed to trying to do the Android screenshot and then connecting that up to Dropbox or something and sharing those data off. Pretty much everything, including PCAP files, you can go through and you can share it up. So as an example, I did a PCAP the other day and I captured it on the G3 and then I exported it to Link Live and I downloaded it onto my laptop to be able to open up in Cloud Shark or Wireshark, whatever you want to work with, and you have access to all that information in there. So a lot of what we've talked about here so far has been geared towards, short term, just looking at things at that point in time. But another really great feature of the G3 and being able to have it married with Link Live is being able to do a periodic test. So instead of it just being ran once, we can run it more often here. So if I look at this on the G3 here, I can go into my auto test here. And I can say, do I want this to be a periodic test or not? And what interval do I want it to run at? How long? What is the duration of that it's going to be at? Comments and everything on there. So what happens is that instead of these tests that I have in here, instead of them only being ran once, now it's going to be ran however many times it can fit in that duration that you have specified in there. So when I click on start, you'll see that it shows up that says periodic auto test status. How is it running? Now, we're not going to wait for this thing to obviously finish the 2 hours to go through all of this. I actually happen to have ran one of these already. So if I go into my results here and I go and I look at this here, you can see that I already have this periodic test ran right here. So I select this one and I'm going to go and I'm going to click on this banner right here. And that's going to filter it all to just these results. So these were all the periodic tests that I ran last night for a duration of 2 hours. And make this a little bit, make it bigger here. So all that information is there. And let's say that I want to go ahead and I want to share that with somebody. So what I can do is, now that I have it narrowed down to just these, I can go ahead and I can say, I want to select all of these. I want to add them to an album. And I already have this album here. So I'm going to add to that album. And if you want to follow along at home and look at this, those of you that are on 2 devices here, I've changed that QR code now to the link of what it is from this shared album in there. So now by doing that, anybody that has access to that QR code, they can actually go through and they can view that data, and they don't have to have a Link Live account at all. So if I go and look at this, there's all those results that I added into that album. So they can go through and they can see, okay, access points. I can see, okay, yep, I can see that you connected, your retry rates, what file layers you're at, signal to noise ratio. I can look at, oh, there's a failure. Why? Let's look at one of these failures right here. Why was this a failure? Well, if I look at it, it says my non-802.11 utilization on channel 3 is pretty high, 51% for some reason. So by sharing that data up, sending that link to them, they can see that. When you're doing the shares, you can control the access to it so that it can be, how long do you want that duration? You want it to be 24 hours? Do you want it to be 6 months? Whatever that case might be. So you can have it be short-term or long-term. As it sits right now, you can't do any password protection on it. The quote-unquote password protection basically is that the link that you get shared with, you just make sure that you only share it with the people that you want to have it. And it's not like somebody can crawl these things anyways, because the link is not something that is going to be, it's not checked. It's not, what I'm trying to say, it's not indexable by search engines. There we go. Brain fart. Couldn't think of what I was trying to say. We're not going to index these things, so these things aren't going to randomly show up on there. And there is an embedded auth token in the URL. That's how we control access to it for the duration. So once that auth token has expired, the data is no longer accessible. Okay, so that's the long-term or that periodic testing of being able to put all this data through. So as you can see from the differences that we had on the G2 to the G3, we've got a lot of new apps out there, and I didn't even scratch the surface on some of these. The packet capture apps, the air mapper apps, being able to do surveys with this device, load floor plans, get all that information in there and bring that up into Link Live, because those are probably topics that we're going to have another webinar on to really show in depth on how you leverage those. But what I wanted to get across on this one is this new way of utilizing the device, using those rich, deep links to be able to navigate yourself through the different screens of the device, and how you kind of change your workflow up a little bit from where we had it with the G2, where we didn't see all these different screens. We just had our quick little list of, okay, this is what we have access to. And when we click stuff, when we get into things, we have to go back to the home, be able to get where we're going. We kind of have to remember where we're at and how the stack navigation works. Now we can dive in and drill down through this by looking at the different analysis areas, the path analysis, the discovery, be able to find targets and everything in there. Okay. Questions time. Let's see here. What do we got in here? All right, so does the Spectrum dongle work with other products like AirCheck G2 or Etherscope NXG? It does work with the NXGs over here, yes. Okay. G2, no. G2 is discontinued, not an active product anymore, so we don't have the development features to be able to do that, and that's part of the Android base that's here. That's why it was important for us to get there so that we can bring tools like the Spectrum app and some of those other apps that are out there. So, can do that. Best way to test PoE protocols with the G3? Sorry, you don't. You don't really test the PoE protocols with it. You can detect the presence of PoE with the test accessory, but if you're doing wired checking, especially where you're wanting to look at PoE and you want to not only know about the presence of PoE, but also what PoE class you can get, you want the 10G or you want Etherscope NXG. So if you're somebody that works a lot with wired alongside wireless, I would strongly recommend you looking at getting the NXG 300 because that has the 6E chip in it. So you're going to get the best of the G3 and the 10G in one single hardware platform. Channel width on auto test using a channel with 40, 80, 160 megahertz on the first page is showed as 20 megahertz channel width. Primarily because how your channels are set up, you have your primary and secondary channels. So it's going to show as 20 megahertz. I think that's partially a display bug. I've noticed that a couple on my test as well. That's feedback that Julio and I will take back to the team to make sure that we can get that adjusted accordingly or represented accordingly in what we're trying to portray with that. You can still use the unit to do AP locations. That's part of the tri-band antenna here is you're going to use it for direction finding. So we still can go through Wi-Fi. We still can go into here and say access points and find an AP. And because it's still going through discovery, it's not going to let me get into all the tools right away. But yes, you still can do the locate to be able to go through and use that locate functionality of it. How many views can be stored offline before upload to Link Live? Ooh, that's a good question. I can't remember what the result. Julio, do you know what the result buffer limit is on the G3?
I sure do. So basically, there is technically no limit. Only the internal memory is the limit. So you can save or keep in buffer as many test results as you want. So different from the G2 where it had a limit. On the G3, you do not. Just need to make sure that their internal memory has enough space. So.
Verify the roaming during a survey. Yeah, so that would be that's a good question about AirMapper. And when you're in AirMapper, it does show you when you're doing an active survey which BSSID you're associated to, so we can show that information. Julio and I will take that again as feedback of what we should another event that we should show. So we talked, yes, you can assign friendly names. Show that air quality. Is there a way to not display 802.11 signals to better understand interferers? No. So the thing is when we're looking at spectrum, it's just RF energy. We can't necessarily pluck out non-802.11 because when we're looking at spectrum and when we're showing you the data inside of the Spectrum app, all of that is just energy. We're not looking at that at a protocol level. We're just looking at it from an RF perspective of what is the energy that we see. We do not have the ability to differentiate Wi-Fi sources versus other, again, with the spectrum analyzer. That question was asked as well. We don't have device classification, to be honest. I don't leverage device classification even in other vendors' products, just simply because it can send you down the wrong path. No, you cannot use the Wi-Fi DBX for spectrum. It is our spectrum analyzer that we've worked with in conjunction with another partner to be able to get it to work with our platform hardware. G3 be able to detect RF energy that can trigger a DFS event. Yeah, as long as you happen to be looking at the spectrum analyzer while that DFS event is happening and it's strong enough, you'll see it. But that's the same as anything out there, is that you have to be, it has to be loud enough to be heard and it has to be in close proximity of you. All right, so the moment that everybody's been waiting for. Should we do a drawing, Julio? Should we give away something?
We should indeed.
We only have 2 minutes left. There's a lot that we can talk about. I know. That's the thing, is there's so much for this, and that's obviously what we want to do, is just kind of talk about some of the new differences between the G3 and the G2. And there's definitely a lot more that we should do, Julio, in terms of putting together some webinars on some deep dives into some of the other features as well, because there's so much new with the G3. It's great.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of questions here still, but we'll come back to those guys after the raffle. There's a few more roadmap related ones.
Yeah, so we can talk about those after we do the thing that everybody's been waiting for, and then when they find out they didn't win, they're gonna all drop off. I know how it goes. You guys are only here because you want to see who's win and if you're gonna be the lucky winner of it. So let's see who is going to be the winner of our AirCheck G3. Feng Wang from AT&T, you are our winner. So we will be in touch with you, and we will be getting that information over to you to be able to get your G3 in hand. So congratulations on winning that.
Congratulations, Fang.
So let's go back a couple questions here. Those of you that have a hard stop at noon, or like I said, now the joint's over. Otherwise, we'll run through some of these questions. We only have about 8 questions here left, 9 questions. So VNC viewer, do you recommend? We don't really have any general recommendation. Any VNC viewer is going to work as long as it's standard. It follows the standard VNC protocols. So you can use any of them: True VNC, Real VNC, Screen Share built into the Mac that has its own VNC in there. Can I use older Spectrum adapters from you, like the Spectrum XT? I'm guessing you're asking about, to be able to leverage into the device. Unfortunately not, because of changes in how the hardware level communicates between the G3 and what we traditionally use with those devices. So it's not that we're just trying to get more money. It's just we have hardware changes. That's what we need to focus on in order to be able to bring this to you.
Mm-hmm.
There is upgrade offers out there. I would highly recommend you talking with your partners or the sales and NetAlly team. There are some really good upgrade deals for getting into a G3. Can it be used like Survey Pro to check the coverage on a map? Yes, it can. That is the Air Mapper feature, which, again, Julio, sounds like we need to do a deep dive on Air Mapper.
Yes, we do.
There are no dumb questions. Every question is a good question. Yes, it can be used for generating heat maps following a new AP installation. Again, Air Mapper, we will get on creating a webinar for that. We can check for rogue APs as well. Anything that shows up, obviously, your rogues are going to show up in the Wi-Fi list here. So that's part of the whole device classification of the APs. I could go through here and I could say, like, let's just pick on my Cradle Point router here and say that that's a rogue AP. I could go through here and I could say, yeah, and this device right here, if I click on the deep link and go into the discovery here, I could say name and authorization. I can say you're unauthorized, or I could say, yeah, you're authorized, or you're a neighbor, give it a different name or whatever, and I could use locate and track it down. So yep, we can see all that. All right, manufacturer offset list. We don't have a manufacturer offset list, but there are some community-driven tools out there. rsocicompared.com is one of them, where you can, yes, put in offset, into the device to be able to make that reading look like a Vocera badge or whatever it is. One of the things about that is that you need to do that testing as well. And I'm the creator of RSSI Compared, so I'll say the caveat as well in here that I say on the site is that data is really dependent upon what you actually see in your environment, because every chipset, every antenna, every device is different. There is no standard, even across AirChecks or iPhones or whatever the case might be. So we need to do our own testing in order to be able to see some of that data realistically. Yeah, you can map the roaming points by Air Mapper. That's, again, we'll talk about those we'll get an Air Mapper webinar scheduled to be able to go through all those. So the last ones there are roadmaps there.
Yep, and I can help with any questions regarding roadmap. So the first one that was basically the first question that was asked during the webinar, I know that G3 will not capture MU traffic in RUs or OFDMA, but is it on the roadmap the possibility to capture the PHY headers and visualize statistics regarding different types of traffic like OFDMA? The answer is yes. When that will happen, that part I don't know yet, but we are indeed thinking about adding the functionality of being able to keep track of the RUs themselves. Another roadmap question here is Link Runner G3 on the plate for 2023, and that's a secret. But keep watching this channel and you may learn more about that later this year. As for Open Locate, that is a good question. It's something that we have not been asked about a lot, but I'll chat with our engineering team about that option and see what they think. We did talk about the next one here. What about compatibility with having a wireless survey tool? Indeed, for those of you that wear a WLPC or watch the WLPC videos, Hamina announced integration with the NetAlly tools, AirCheck G3 or Etherscope. And basically, when they release their solution, you will have the option of performing a site survey using AirMapper on the AirCheck G3 or the Etherscope, upload that to Link Live, and then push that into Hamina. So that will be available when the Hamina tool is released later this year. And the last question here, also roadmap related, use G3 as a certified wireless card to be used by Survey Pro software. That one, I don't think we'll be moving into. That's more of a tethered type of solution. That being said, we are also working on a USB-based 6E adapter for AirMagnet Survey Pro users too. So if you still prefer to use the AirMagnet Survey Pro software with your laptop, we'll be providing that option in the future. Of course, I will highly recommend checking out the AirMapper app on the AirCheck, which we didn't have time to cover during today's session. But as Blake mentioned, well, I hope we'll be able to talk a little more about it on a separate session. And okie doke. So Blake, I think that covers all the questions, and we had a lot of them this time, 51 total. So, so wow.
Yeah, that was a. Oops, I was trying to get back here. That definitely is a lot of questions I went through, and this was a lot of material. Appreciate you all hanging out 6 minutes over on the time as well. Again, I showed this at the beginning here in case if I forgot or didn't get to it. So I want to just put the buck here again. You'll receive a copy of the recording. Obviously, we didn't have any slide decks really for this, so there'll just be access to the recordings through the BrightTalk platform. Questions, feel free to reach out to myself or the sales and NetAlly team. Either of us can help you either get into a G3 or get some questions answered for you. And then the rest of our Wi-Fi webinar series are up there as well, so that you can see all those and check out the past ones if you missed them. And yeah, Julio's got that out there shown again here. So again, congratulations to our winner. I've already sent it over to the NetAlly team, so they will get in touch with you on getting your shipping information to get that sent out. And yeah, thanks for attending and have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.